So it's not exactly breaking news. Facebook finally admitted what most of us have always known: the biased fact checks they've used to censor free speech and to police what Americans can read and watch are just their opinion. But the damage has already been done. The progressive one-party big tech media bully pulpit has been used to influence public opinion, period. Now, some believe that they use their power to slant the 2020 election for Biden. Many of us have been warning about this dangerous trend for years. But thanks in part to journalist John Stossels' lawsuit, a little more truth has finally been exposed. I'm David Fiorazzo, and this is Christ and Culture. Not that it will do much good at this point, but I'm thankful John Stossel pulled back the curtain, exposing the left's monitoring of news and commentary. Their supposed quest for truth is a big fat farce. Their battle against misinformation shouldn't fool anyone, but they already did, and they fooled millions. Another concern is the fact that those who control information are censoring, deleting, flagging, shadow banning, and silencing Christians, conservatives, Republicans, and others without apology. It's been well established for decades the news media is owned and operated by the left. Social media has followed suit. So how can we have a truly free republic with open and respectful dialogue with these serious threats to the First Amendment? Does this not sound more like communist policy? Oh, but they say they want to enforce the sharing of accurate information. Really? But who exactly gets to decide what's accurate, what's truthful, factual, or what is false and misleading? Big tech lefties and their government comrades in power, of course. Now, you may be wondering how Facebook wants you to think about its, quote, fact checkers. According to statements on its own website, it says this: each time a fact checker rates a piece of content as false, Facebook significantly reduces the content's distribution. We apply a warning label that links to the fact checker's article, disproving the claim, end quote. So, let me get this straight. Ideologically driven fact checkers rate, reduce, and disprove. I think I got it. Men and women who generally have an anti-Christian, secular, progressive worldview are today's arbiters of truth? Let that sink in for a minute. Now, this is another reason that we're seeing evil being called good and good evil right before our eyes. Now, the lawsuit brought by John Stossel was because he lost large numbers of viewers and readers because his posts were labeled, quote, partly false. Many of us can relate. Now, I agree with Stossel and others who say Facebook's refusal to acknowledge its bias and its mistakes hurts not only the free expression of ideas, it affects individual citizens. When Facebook fact-checks something, its algorithm makes sure fewer people see whatever we share. Now, they're a private corporation, and they're protected by certain laws, so they can do what they want in a free society, right? But the question is, are they monitoring and censoring people equally across the board? Not at all. And this is a huge part of the problem. Their intolerance also impacts many of us monetarily. Now, I personally have been censored, suppressed, and or shadow banned by big tech for many years now. What are my choices? Delete my accounts before they do, or start using other platforms. Now, I've decided to stay and reach the few people I still can until they kick me off entirely, if it comes to that. Now, many pastors and ministry leaders can relate. I wrote an extensive article this year called "Censorship is Here and They're Coming for Christians." Darkness is spreading, but in the end, it will fail. Why? Truth wins. But in the meantime, if you disagree with the power elites and enemy forces, they'll shut you down without apology. So remember this: The left can't win many arguments and debates. Why? Because their policies are awful and their worldview is warped. They rejected God and moral absolutes, so they now feel compelled to silence or suppress the opposition, those who disagree with them, especially those of us who hold to a biblical worldview. Now, in Stossels' case, all he did was post videos that offended the cult of climate change, what he refers to as, quote, the third rail of liberal politics, end quote. His videos simply talked about issues such as forest management and using technology to adapt. Science Feedback is a third party contracted by Facebook. They flagged Stossels' posts as false or lacking context. So another thing to remember here, science doesn't speak, scientists do. You won't believe their reason for flagging Stossels' posts. You ready? They didn't like his tone. He explains, quote, that is, you can't write anything about climate change unless you say it's the worst disaster in the history of humanity and we must spend trillions to fight it. As for that fact check label we slapped on your piece, in Facebook's response to Stossel, it argues, well, that's protected opinion under the First Amendment, end quote. The New York Post, Breitbart, and countless other conservative news or media outlets have faced similar censorship. Now, this is a new reality we have sadly gotten used to. So here's a key takeaway from those who have been through the fact-checking gauntlet, even if their decisions were successfully disputed. In a majority of cases in which Facebook fact checks were lifted or removed, by that time it no longer mattered. Why? Because it was too late to have influence or much meaningful impact. People tend to believe what is first reported. The fact-check industry is funded by liberal moguls such as George Soros, Democrat socialists, globalists, government-funded nonprofits, and the liberal tech giants themselves. The so-called fact-checkers are far from the arbiters of truth that too many naive Americans believe them to be. Brent Bozell of the Media Research Center has done outstanding work over the last few decades, and he commented on last year's election concerns many of us share. He said this, quote, it is undeniable, Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, and a handful of other tech companies are a radical leftist cabal, a very powerful technocracy with the ability to handpick the President of the United States. They also have the power to shape and bend the public policy beliefs of the American electorate. Twitter, Facebook, and Google, YouTube proved they are emphatically not neutral platforms. In fact, they are an indisputable and integral arm of the radical left. Agreed. Thank you, sir. It is indisputable. Most of today's social media giants are, and their alleged news outlets, are for all practical purposes arms of the Democrat National Committee. And since most news corporations and social media outlets in America obviously and openly support one political party, then we no longer have an honest, fair, free press. So what we see in here instead is ideological commentary and opinion masquerading as journalistic integrity. Though this is not surprising, it is extremely disappointing and even dangerous. Why? Because too many people at this point have accepted that this is the way it is, and they believe it's not going to change. Well, my friends, it might not change, but doing nothing is never a good option. Freedom of speech and religious expression are worth fighting for because the ability to openly share the gospel and talk about our faith in Christ is why we are here. Merry Christmas. God bless you, and keep speaking the truth about things that matter.